All right. Welcome, everyone, to one of the most impactful conversations of the day, building relationships that propel your career. We all know that success doesn't happen in a vacuum. Behind every career breakthrough is often a connection, a mentor, or a moment of shared support. And today's conversation is all about that. It's really how we go beyond surface level networking to build authentic and lasting relationships that open doors and fuel our growth. Whether you're a natural connector or still figuring out how to work a room or a Zoom, you're in the right place. So let's dive in. Let's kick things off with a personal reflection. Can my lovely panelists share at least one relationship that significantly shaped your career and how it came to be? Chantelle, can you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with you all. When I was reflecting on this question, it was quite difficult to pinpoint one relationship because I've had a number that have sort of touched different spheres of my career. But the one standout was one that's actually evolved over time. Towards the start of my career at Morgan Stanley, just over 8.5 years ago, I had an individual who was a client, very senior client, sits on our European Operating Committee, reports into our CEO. And it was quite clear that we had a lot in common and some shared values. So I said to myself, this is someone to watch and this is someone to get close to. But I was a bit apprehensive about sort of maintaining our relationship beyond just sort of the business as usual client interaction, given how senior she was and the fact that I'm a little bit more naturally introverted and don't necessarily like just approaching people out of the blue. So I took a step back and thought about a slightly longer term approach. I'm hoping that everybody here has heard of Carla Harris and has read her book, Strategize to Win. In it, she talks about something she calls the performance currency, which is intellect, experience, and strong execution multiplied by multiple occurrences. So I knew that taking this principle, I had to focus on delivering my A game every single time I was dealing with this client because I had my own sort of mini agenda in the background. So I ensured that anytime I dealt with them, I was giving them the white glove service. My performance was exemplary, so that when they thought of me, they thought of the sort of excellent service that I'd provided to them. So that when I did actually reach out to them for career advice, it didn't seem out of the blue. We already had that sort of trusted relationship. And she was open and really, really willing to give me her time. And that was really early on in my career. This relationship has evolved from client to sponsor to my most senior mentor and my friend. I'm getting married later this year, and she was the first one to RSVP, which was amazing. But she's my go-to person anytime I need any anyone to sort of bounce ideas off, anyone to sort of put me back in my place sometimes when I think I deserve something that I haven't gotten. She keeps it very honest. And that's one thing that I absolutely cherish about our relationship, is that she challenges me. She pushes back on me. She doesn't give me the answers. She makes me think about things, and sort of helps me frame things in a different way. So I told her I was going to talk about this example, but I said I wouldn't name drop her because she very much likes to sit in the background. But she has been my advocate through and through, and I definitely wouldn't be where I am today without her.
I love that. Well, congratulations on the upcoming nuptials, and also how wonderful I think that you tied in this sort of evolution of mentorship, right? It started really kind of like, hierarchical, and now it's gotten to a place of really, just being an advocate and being a friend, right? Which is amazing. Sonali, do you have any reflections that you'd like to share?
Yeah, as you start your journey, quite honestly, with your family when you're born, and then, go to school and college and you start your career, there are mentorships along the way, right? All throughout. And some family members have played pivotal role in pushing you forward, introducing you to new concept, new career ideas. So that's I've been fortunate to learn from them and get inspired by them. Also, I grew up in India and then later immigrated to United States about 25 years ago. And when I started my journey here, I didn't go to school, so didn't have typical network of mentors who could really help me and guide me in my journey. And I am the founder and managing partner at Augment Ventures. So a very unique profession where not many women are part of. And and in general, it's a very competitive and a very small community. And when I moved to a new country, I was fortunate that a professor at University of Michigan, was my great mentor. I engaged with a conversation as a complete stranger, where my introduction was, "Hi, I'm Sonali from India," because I didn't have any context how to bridge the gap between my two worlds that I was coming from. I had a tremendous amount of experience, had taken companies to NASDAQ and all those kind of stuff. But at the same time, I was in a new environment with new people, and how I bridge that. And for no reason, absolutely, it's not that I went to his school or anything, but he took a genuine interest in the work that I had done previously in my career. And I think coming to a conversation with authenticity and saying what you have done and seeking, being open to communicating with other people and giving them room to mentor and guide you. Chantelle, your example was so interesting that you mentioned you were also open to receiving it, right? So I think mentorship works when you're also open to receiving it. So I was fortunate that, someone from the industry, someone from the community was able to guide me through various steps. And quite honestly, I would not be here today and I would not have the kind of confidence that I had with that mentorship. So that is one story in my new life here in the United States. This really stands out. But there are multiple mentors in my life who have really impacted how I work and how I engage with the community within my organization as well as outside my organization.
That's so fascinating, right? So you took a chance and you reached out to someone who didn't have a tie to, right, either through work or through school, and shared about your experience. That person took an interest, and a meaningful relationship grew from that. I love that. Thea, do you have a personal reflection you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I think of like the really meaningful connections I've made in two different groups. So I have my networking folks, and then I call them my vent working folks. So I think it's really important to have people that are going to guide your career. An example of that is I had a client, I've worked agency and I've worked corporate, and I had a client at my first agency. Her name is Susie. She's the coolest woman ever. And when I left that agency, got recruited, went to another agency, all of that business she took and followed, which was amazing. Then later, my husband got a job in another state. My work wouldn't let me work remote. And so I had to get another job, posted on LinkedIn. Susie was like, "Hey, I know a girl at this company." Coincidentally, that girl was, the vice president of talent acquisition. So that was helpful. And so I got LinkedIn that way. They ended up creating a job for me that way, but I never would have had that except it was for Susie like 4 other jobs ago. So love you, Susie Blakely. She's incredible. But vent working, I feel like it's also really important to have mentors that will let you complain and will let you say how you feel. Because a lot of times when you're networking, we're thinking about everything as like we have to show up these bright, shiny, happy, perfect faces all the time. And like that's not real life. So where you can have those friends, Susie sees the bright, happy, shiny version of me, whereas someone like, I won't say his name, but I have another vent working partner. I can't say his name because he knows where all of my dead bodies are buried. I have him to really like tell me emotionally, how do I guide myself through this, or how do I help myself through these situations? So sometimes the person who you can be really vulnerable and open with isn't necessarily going to be that same person that is going to like propel your career. It's awesome if they are the same person. That's incredible. But you also have to have like that good vent working audience, especially when like your husband's tired of hearing about you and like you don't want your best friend to know that you're like on the verge. So having those vent working folks are really important too.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? The fact that you don't have to have somebody who is everything, and that you can have a community of folks you can go to for different things, and to be open and authentic, I think in various capacities is so, so important when it comes to building those meaningful relationships. I think I'm gonna have to keep networking in my back pocket for
Bring it back.
the future. Well, many of us hear the word networking and immediately we think of awkward small talk at big events. I definitely have been there where I feel like I'm like at a table. I don't know if people still have business cards, but sitting in a corner nursing a drink and trying to think about something besides like saying what's the weather like, and what you do and how to explain it in like 30 seconds or less. Um, how do you all personally define networking? What does it look like when it's done in a really authentic and right way? Sonali, do you have some thoughts you'd like to share about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned in my opening remarks, I had to start my life from ground zero with no friends, no colleagues, no school buddies, and find space for myself. So I had to come to this position and build a firm. I had to engage with a larger community on my own. And along the way, I just found just marvelous, wonderful people who believed in the vision that we have. I think the way, so it's networking is a strange thing. It really doesn't work if you're not authentic and you're not willing to give. So, I think my approach to networking has been how to enrich others with what you have to share your experiences. So, the approach that I have taken like I said, my introduction when I moved was, "Hi, I'm Sonali from India. What are you doing?" So, with that question, like, who are you? Just getting an understanding of who the person is and finding kernels of commonality or kernels of curiosity from which you can really jump off and start a authentic conversation. So if you're trying to, at least in my experience, if you're trying to get something, I think like people can smell fear, and people can smell and feel that you're trying to take, I don't want to say advantage of, or you're trying to get to something, right? Whereas if you come with the intention of giving to them, giving in the conversation, I think you're able to build a lot better relationships. And it's a circle. What goes around comes back to you. So that has been my approach in most conversation. You have to also be very present. I think that is a key aspect in networking because sometimes we are so busy responding that we don't hear what they're saying. If they mentioned in something about their child, their family, or something, I think a good person would pick up on that and ask a supplementary question. I think we are not able to build authentic relationship because we are crafting our response to whatever other person is saying and not truly listening. So my yeah, sort of suggestion to everyone is be active listener, and that's when you will form authentic relationships.
That is so powerful. I think, yeah, there's a quote that says, when you hear to respond versus to listen, to actually internalize what someone's saying, I think that is so powerful. And I think that in addition to that, it's so interesting that you bring up this element of service, right? And giving. I think oftentimes when we think of networking in a traditional sense, it's like, okay, what does this person have to offer to me, right? And when we think about the relationship really like a relationship, and there being two sides and a give and a take, and I have something to give to you, and I'd love to know more about you, I think that that truly breeds, as you mentioned so astutely, that authenticity that is so critical to building meaningful and lasting relationships. So I think what we're touching upon is something that's really interesting, right? Is this idea that sometimes, networking can feel super transactional, especially in today's world where, folks are hybrid and you're completely remote and building connections, happens over Zoom. What are some ways that folks can foster these authentic relationships when they're perhaps limited, to being online? Thea, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, for sure. So I am very much an extroverted introvert. Like you wouldn't really know by my outward facing personality, but like my passion, I like just not talking. I like being alone. It's great. And so I think the benefit to doing online connections is that you still kind of can be alone. Like you don't have to have that awkward energy of being with a person. One of the really cool things that I saw was actually by my friend Amy Brown. So Amy was laid off for a bit. She ended up during her time, well, she had a baby. That's a huge, I think all moms on this call, like you guys are incredible and you're doing so much work. So just like I don't have children and I am giving you pats on the back for all of that. So if you're thinking about networking on top of being a mom, like go you. But one of the things that Amy realized was like after her pregnancy, she was like, well, I still have to find a job. What am I going to do at this time? And so she set up a Calendly appointment, posted it on LinkedIn, and it's just like, hey, if you guys want to chat, like come chat. Like you didn't have to have a specific agenda. You didn't have to be looking for a job. You didn't have to have a job for her, but it was really just like a come hang out and come chat. And now Amy got this awesome job as a writer at Apple. And like none of that would have happened if she hadn't done this like big, not even, I don't even think we should call that networking. Like that's just like casual connections. Like we're just making friends online. Which is just a ton of fun. So I think if you're able to do that, what Sonali was saying too about personal relationships, like that moment when I'm talking to someone and I mention my dog and they're like, oh, I want to see a picture of your dog. Like that person immediately has more social capital with me than a next person who's like, oh, cool, you have a dog. So I think if you're able to ask questions online and like put yourself out of your comfort zone for 15 minutes, like when you're done, you can just slam your laptop shut and not talk to anyone the rest of the day if you want to. So just I think thinking about online networking, less like networking and more like fun friend, like speed dating.
Yeah, that's such an interesting concept. And kudos to your friend, Amy. That's an amazing accomplishment and awesome and creative approach to thinking about networking too, from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah.
Sonali, do you have any thoughts about what connecting in a really meaningful way looks like when you're virtual?
Yeah, so being virtual sort of started happening more so during the COVID period, and then all of us were forced to sort of adapt to it. In our case, our team was always distributed. So in a strange way, we were one of the first Microsoft Team pilot users, and so we were virtual before it was cool to be virtual. And in that setting, with a small team, how do you build trust, right? And we work on intense and dense problems, how you solve for that, how you give voice to every member of the team to express themselves and not make it very cagey and scripted, right? Just like Thea was saying. And I totally agree. All our, fortunately or unfortunately, all our team members have dogs. So dog pictures are always welcome and shared very frequently. Oh, my dog did this, or I got a toy for my dog, or whatever that is. So I think finding that common thought, again, like, not to repeat myself over here, just active listening helps. But in a online setting, giving people space to finish their thought becomes really important. And quite honestly, it is, once they are able to finish their thought, there is a lot of engagement. So I think as natural as you can make it, the frequency, particularly with your team members, right? When you're meeting with your team members, the frequency of those, because we are on Teams or Zoom all the time with different things. In a networking setting, oftentimes where you have a breakout session, a breakout room, I think a facilitator really helps if they are just a group of strangers. And just like how you are posing a various question, it can start a thread. So, and if people come to a networking event in whichever industry, with whatever topic, then you have some point of view to share. So I think just sharing your point of view, which was illicit conversation, and then it becomes free flow. So that's what I found sort of helpful, is that in networking setting, in conferences where there are breakout rooms, you have your point of view. And if there is a facilitator, better. Or, if there's just like, hey, you're in your breakout room and you start your conversation, I think you can take the initiative by introducing yourself. Hey, I am so and so, and I do. Does anyone work in this industry? Does anyone have interest? So posing open-ended question facilitates engagement. So that is how I felt that even being virtual, you can get some amount of connectivity and authentic relationships.
Yeah, that's such an interesting piece, right? Is like having these open-ended conversations allows for almost the natural kind of conversations to flow, which oftentimes I feel like virtually can sometimes feel it doesn't come as easily to us. So very valid. Piggybacking off of something you said, Thea, just quickly, I wanted to ask if you had any tips for the introverted extroverts or full introverts. How can folks network and approach it in a way that doesn't feel as intimidating? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I love this topic. Okay, my advice, if you're like, I have to motivate myself to do this, and I hate the phrase when people are like, you don't reward yourself, you're not a dog. I'm like, actually, I am an animal, and I do deserve to have my little treats. So I will say gamify your networking. So an example of that is like, I'm considering this networking for me. Transparently, my department got completely eliminated 2 weeks ago. So I'm super thankful to Valentina for still including me on this panel. So I'm on the job market just like all of y'all. And what I have done is every time I message a hiring manager, I'm allowed to play a computer game for an hour where I don't have to talk to anyone. I manage my little 2-point museum. It's very chill and fun. So if there's something you really like to do, whether it's like gardening or if it's like, oh, I'm going to make these dope Rice Krispie treats, okay, you can do all of that, but first you have to message 3 hiring managers. First, you have to do 3 of those awful job applications where you have to manually insert all of your stuff every time, even though they have your resume and your LinkedIn. It is so annoying. However, you can reward yourself, gamify it, just think about it. Yes, absolutely. Taylor, that Parks and Rec gift you just dropped, treat yourself. I'm all about that life. So introverted, extrovert, you can treat yourself while you're alone. Go get a facial afterwards. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I often gamify cleaning up my toddler's toys, so I think applying it to networking might be a better use. Awesome, great advice. So in that same sort of vein, we talked a lot about like do's and don'ts, and virtual and in person, and meaningful relationships, and etiquette when it comes to networking can feel oftentimes really tricky, especially when you're following up or you're asking for help. In that same vein, kind of what are some of the do's and don'ts that you all can kind of speak to when it comes to reaching out professionally? Chantelle, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of information out there about what you should do, what you shouldn't do in terms of networking. So I can appreciate that it gets overwhelming. And obviously it's not one size fits all. Everybody sort of has their own things that they follow. But some of the best advice that I've received about professional outreach is having a purpose and really basic, setting an agenda for a meeting. I'm not a natural networker. So Thea, all your tips that you've been giving, I'm loving it. I'm writing it down. But sometimes when you're talking, I'm like, oh my God, I can't do that. That sounds horrible to me. So like having an agenda for a meeting is something that I need, because I need to be grounded and focused and know exactly what I'm going to say. So it obviously things go off script, but just having those, I don't know, three bullet points that you've come to the meeting to talk about when it comes to networking can really help center you and sort of bring you back into focus. One of the things that I tend to do when I don't have an agenda and there's just the tiniest bit of sort of dead space is I'll start rambling and then I'll go off topic and then I'll forget what I actually wanted to talk about in the first place. So having that just means you've got a little bit more structure and it's a little bit more straightforward. It also means that if there's any questions that you're going to ask the person that you're meeting with out of the blue that maybe they could do some prep work for, they have that information to hand so they can come fully prepared to help you the best way that they can. And the first thing I mentioned was having a purpose. So I get approached. I don't work in recruitment anymore, but I think people look at my LinkedIn and still do, and I get approached for coffee chats with sort of no context, so sort of no rationale behind it whatsoever. And I kind of think, what is it that you are actually asking from me? So I think just be really clear when you're reaching out to someone. Take a step back and think about the why. What is it? What is the gap that you're trying to fill? Or what's the problem that you're trying to solve? And is this person best placed to actually help you facilitate a solution? So if I'm thinking about networking within a business, I'll often speak to people and they're like, oh, I've got to speak to this managing director. I've got to speak to the most senior person in my division. And I'll ask why. And often that's not the best person that they actually need to seek out. So don't underestimate sort of networking within your peer level, or even more junior. Sometimes individuals have been at the firm longer, so they know how to navigate the business a bit better. They can sort of pass your information on to someone that might be, again, better suited to answer that question. But don't make a beeline for the most senior person just straight away, just because you think that's the person that's going to sort of be able to advocate for you the most. Often that's not the case. So I often tell people to step back and think about what it is they're actually trying to achieve with the reach out. I also think in terms of my biggest don't is not following up when you're trying to build, especially when you're trying to build like a mentor-mentee relationship. It's my absolute bugbear when I've sort of sat down with someone, maybe given them some reading or someone to follow up with, and then I just never hear from them again. And I think when you're on the mentor side of the relationship, it can feel quite demoralizing because you don't know if they've done it. You don't know if it's been helpful. You then have someone else reach out. And I think, actually, was that advice that I gave no good? Is that why they didn't follow up? So you've got to, if you've been given a task or a piece of advice in that meeting, just send a quick follow-up note just to say, by the way, I've done that and this was the outcome. Could we maybe put some time in for next steps? And then you build that continuous relationship. Or someone's given you some reading or a podcast to listen to, think about following up with, oh, I read that. And actually, these were some of the questions that it sort of provoked in my mind. And I'd love to have another meeting to sit down and discuss that with you. I think it's quite an easy way to ensure that it's not a one-stop relationship. It's that there's a continuous flow of information. So there's a lot of like do's and don'ts, but that's my biggest don't in terms of not following up. So yeah, I'm going to stop there. I'm sure some of the other panelists have something to add.
Yeah, does anyone have any other reflections on do's and don'ts when it comes to networking and outreach?
I'm just going to plus up what Chantelle said about, like, if you talk to a mentor and they send you something impactful, like, say thank you, check in with them in a few months later. Because like I have so many mentor people who are like, be my mentor. And then I don't hear from them for like 6 months. And I'm like, wait, I was really worried about you and I care about you and I want you to have good stuff happen. So just like follow back up with people.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It sort of ties in with what Sonali had talked about a lot with like those authentic relationships, right? It's like, these are relationships. They're not just, kind of like, hey, I'm looking to get this job and I'm interested kind of thing. And so really, when we're thinking about reciprocity, I think it's something that doesn't get stated enough. I really loved, Chantelle, your emphasis on clarity. Like, what am I hoping to achieve out of the relationship? Because I think that that's definitely the North Star when we think about meaningful connections that transcend just, hey, this is my name, this is what I do, and I'd love to meet you and have a relationship. And the other thing I think that was also something really important that often doesn't get stated enough too is this idea of really getting mentorship at all levels of professional experience, right? It's like you said, oftentimes people think you have to go to the managing director or the VP or someone who's been at the organization for 20 plus years, when oftentimes the things that you might be interested in knowing about, either from an industry or a function or a job specifically, all can be probably shared in a really interesting and compelling and really relevant way from folks who've been in the role or have been doing it for several years. And I think that that's the element of networking that oftentimes I think gets overlooked, right? Is this idea of peer-to-peer networking too. Mentorship doesn't always have to be a top-down kind of thing, which is awesome.
If I can add another thought to it in terms of the question that you pose in terms of etiquette, in today's environment, we get so much email, which is not funny, right? Real email plus spam email plus industry newsletter. So I think a few years back, the frequency of follow-up was like lower in the sense like if person doesn't respond to you once or twice or something of that sort. But quite oftentimes, and I include myself, I sometimes miss it. It's just like the inflow of email is too much. So I think the new definition of etiquette is that don't like stop after just one outreach, at least couple outreaches, and when the person does not respond, this is just for networking or mentorship or whatever. I think the new, I mean, you shouldn't be hounding every day. That's sort of like, then you will come in the stalker category, I guess. But you should give people to get back to you at least in a week or 2 week, and then follow up at least 2 or 3 times more. It is just too much content and too much email. So that's sort of from an etiquette perspective. I would like to people not to get disheartened when they are trying to build a relationship or seeking a connection with somebody, or someone has introduced them to somebody and that other person hasn't responded. It's absolutely fine to at least do 2 or 3 more outreach within some time bands of at least, which I would say, 4 days to 7 days.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's such a balancing act, right? And I think oftentimes, and maybe I'm making a sweeping generalization, but as women, we also have this kind of fear of being too like, am I overstepping? Am I bothering? I don't want to add more to their day. And sometimes we might be reticent to do the follow up that's necessary in a meaningful way, right? Given our requisite amount of time to really kind of, acknowledge, and build that relationship and stuff. So completely agree. Oftentimes we and we've talked about this quite a bit, right? We focus on what we want from our network. What do I want from a mentor, right? But can we flip it? And what are some ways that folks can, give back and be a generous connector to others? I think, particularly folks who might be earlier on in their career or who are maybe doing a career pivot, it can feel hard to feel like you actually have anything of value to offer and to create this sort of kind of meaningful relationship. So would love to hear any the suggestions or thoughts on how to build those kinds of networks in a very authentic way. Chantelle, do you want to share some stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on something really interesting, Val, and I think when people say, they're nervous because they don't know what they have to bring, everybody has something to bring, right? Everybody is a subject matter expert in something, whether it's professional or personal life. Everybody has that USP that no one else can see something from their perspective. So ensure you're bringing that to the conversation. Sort of think about the person that you're reaching out to. What are some of their maybe concerns, or maybe what are some of their interests, and think about how you can add value in that space. So one of the clients that I work with, she's really into sport. Randomly, it's never come up, but I did some research. She's really into badminton. I don't know if you have badminton in the US. Okay, good. But it's something that I found out, and then that evolved into me finding out that she's super into sport. So one of the meetings that we had set up, I said, look, do you want to move this to the end of the day, and we can do something a bit more active, because I saw X, Y, and Z. And she was sort of blown away, and sort of that was her self-care, and she didn't mind sort of adding me to it. So think about how you can add to people's to what people might be thinking about in terms of their challenges. I always try to frame those relationships as if they're client relationships. So you go into that client relationship thinking, what can I give? Not what can I get, almost. So think about how you can add value in an area that they might be interested in. Aside from that, one of the big things that I try and do in terms of giving back is just giving people their flowers and sort of acknowledging them where I can. So I'm a big proponent in sort of shouting about people on social media, submitting individuals for any awards that I can. And it gets to the point that some of my mentors are like, okay, enough, we get it. But no, it's important that they understand that I value what they do, and I think that others should know about their success in that area as well. And another thing I try and do, particularly now I've moved out of recruitment, is thinking about the medium to long term view. So I still get a lot of people sort of reaching out to me about roles and things, and I don't have any oversight of that, but I know who does. So I can think about who I can connect people to. So don't think, oh, I can't answer the question, so I'm going to stop it there and then. But I think and try and connect them to a second degree, a third degree person who could then potentially help them, because you never know when that relationship is going to sort of come back around again. And I think Thea touched on it earlier. Just check in with people, ask them how they're doing. Not every meeting has to have a I want to cover X, Y, and Z, or I'm having this issue in my life. It could just be, do you want to grab a coffee because I want to check in and see how you're doing and make sure you're okay, because you clearly, the person that's investing in you obviously cares about you and your career. So just give them some love back. And I think that will come back to you tenfold when you're trying to build that relationship.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? We, again, going back to that humanization and that we are all people. And if we show up for each other as people, beyond even professional networking relationships, that really goes a long way. I also love, Chantelle, that you said that you get chastised for saying how wonderful the people that you work with and for and have worked with and for have been. I think there's like a quote that says we uplift ourselves by uplifting others. And I think that there's so much validity in that. And it's so nice and refreshing to hear that, yeah, even wherever you are in your career journey, that you can do that for somebody else, I think is such a phenomenal piece of advice. So in that same vein, because we talked a little bit about it, right? For someone who's starting to build their network from scratch, perhaps again, after a career break or a big transition, what is, the first step that you all would recommend when it comes to making those meaningful connections? Sonali, do you have some reflections you'd like to share?
Yeah, since my transition was, a very stark when I moved countries. This is an interesting question. I think, first step, anything, whether, you're moving geographies, if you've taken a break in your career and starting, or you just want your career to take a different pathway. You're going this way and you've decided like, hey, you either went to school or you saw an opportunity in another sector and you want to go in this direction, and you have to now build a whole new set of relationships that will propel your career forward, your life forward. I think first and the most important step is to get out of your house, put on those beautiful shoes that we have in our closet, and get and meet people, get a cup of coffee, and just be very, very honest. Like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do and I'm trying to build. I'd like your advice. I think that is the step one. I think the more Chantelle, and the previous question that you answered, like double on that, double down on that, like, very, very good points. And that's the way to get started. And when you engage with your audience in different sectors in different ways, uh, just sharing your story as to why you're here and what you want to do, they will open up, and they will say, okay, why don't you go and talk to this one? At least that's what worked for me when I said, like, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to build. And they said, why don't you talk to this one? And that the second person pointed me to another person, and making sure that the person who has opened their network for that introduction, you go and thank them, right? That follow through that we all talked about. You say, hey, thank you, Susan, for making this introduction. Thank you, John, for putting me in touch with this one. And if there is an opportunity for all three of you to get together, making sure you're on top of that. So I think those are my things. One is like engaging, taking yourself outside. There is no other way than for you to go and meet people in person. There is just literally no other way. The second, and in today's environment, and in this virtual scenario, of course, engaging and sharing your story in a virtual get together is again an important aspect. The second thing is making sure that you follow through with your thank yous. It is such an easy thing. The world still works a lot with thank you and please and thank you. Don't forget that. Your mom told, your grandma told you, don't forget it. It is the simplest thing to do, and I just don't understand for some reason people don't think. The third thing in today's environment, I would say, is don't get disheartened if you don't hear back. There is so much noise in today's environment. You just have to be persistent. So don't give up on your dreams or your things that you're pursuing. Be persistent and follow up.
Yeah, I think that what you said is so interesting, right? Is this idea of building your network and these different levels and then bringing them all together instead of just kind of keeping them separate, right? And gratitude cannot be overstated enough, especially when folks have a lot of stuff going on in their lives and day to day. I also think it's really interesting, Sonali, that your suggestion and advice also comes somewhat in juxtaposition to Thea's friend who, was taking a career break and then went virtual and did virtual networking. And so to also see that there are different ways of doing this, I think is also a really interesting, thought that I think folks don't often think about, right? It's usually like, oh, there's a one way to do something. This is the way, this is the best way. And we know that that's not the case. It looks different for many folks. We do have time for one question from the audience. I think this is an interesting one, so I'm going to open it up to all of you if you have any specific thoughts. The question is, I feel like I'm better at the first phase of networking, making those initial connections, but then I struggle with the next phase, which is that element that we talked about, staying connected, especially in our virtual first world, a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn that I think we can all appreciate. Do the panelists have suggestions for that second phase? It's easy for us to say, yeah, follow up and express gratitude, but what does that actually look like in practice?
I think I could just add, there has to be, you cannot and should not be following up with everyone in your network. It doesn't make sense, quite honestly. That is, if someone's interested in you, they will follow you on LinkedIn or something of that sort. But in your current project, in your current time period of life, there will be a few people that you should follow up on. And it has to be meaningful information, right? For you to go to next phase. If you're successful at the first stage of your interaction with that, and you think that this person is going to be valuable in the future, then, there could be some personal achievements or work achievements or some stories that you can oftentimes just share them, or an article, or what their interests are. Maybe they, like you said, that lady was interested in badminton. Maybe there's a tournament coming around in their area, and you just send them. There is no, so like sometimes the expectation is this has to end into something. That's not how relationship works. When you send a note to your sister or your girlfriend, oh, this is so funny, oh my god, like ha ha ha, right? And so that's how authentic relationships are built. Sometimes you hear or you find a very funny story on some music or whatever that person's other interests are. So that's how authentic hey, this made me think of you, just sharing it for fun. And that's it. So that the conversation will keep going on, and it has to come naturally to the core people. Like if you looked at my LinkedIn, there are like 5,000 of them are there. I mean, like I'm clearly not sending texts and emails and follow-ups with all of them, right? It doesn't make sense. So in given period of time, there will be priority relationships that you want to convert, taking to the next stage. So you will engage with meaningful conversation, and with some of your other relationships, checking your naturally, if you've paid attention to what they are into, you should, on random basis, share that specific information.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Not everybody has to be the next mentor kind of networking connection. As Thea said, not every networking connection is going to save your life, which is a very valid and great final piece of wisdom. Thank you, all of you. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for your advice and your insight. As we've learned today, and we won't stop learning, building meaningful relationships doesn't have to feel overwhelming. You can start with just one conversation, dog meme, right? One connection, one moment of support. And if you're looking for a space to make those connections and swap advice and support other women in the workplace, shameless plug, join the Fairygodboss community. It's a place where professional networking meets real talk, and your next career opportunity, mentor, or cheerleader might already be there. Thank you again to all our wonderful panelists, and don't go far. Coming up next on stage is a fireside chat called A Game-Changing Approach to Modern Stay-at-Home Motherhood with Neha Ruch and Gabi Caracciolo. Stay tuned. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.